Alissa Marie Turney was a 17-year-old from Phoenix, Arizona. She was the studious type, but also had rebellious tendencies. And she had a boyfriend. On May 17, 2001, she was taken out of school early by her stepfather. He took her to lunch, then they went home. Then he went out to run some errands. When he came back, Alyssa was gone. She was never seen again. I'm Ed Denzel, and this is Unfound. Manifesto. My perception is that just the uttering of this English language word can make people squirm. At least a little bit. Many of you might think of the Unabomber. He had a manifesto. There have been people all over the political map who have written manifestos. The most famous one being the Communist Manifesto from Marx and Engels. And according to Wikipedia, former leader of North Korea Kim Jong-il had a manifesto about movies. Yes, really. But despite the highbrowness sound of the word and some of the people who have written them, the definition is quite mundane. It's a written statement declaring publicly the intentions, motives, or views of its author. So today you're going to get to hear about someone who wrote a manifesto. That person is Alyssa's stepfather, Michael Turney. Within it, he details, among many other things, who he thinks caused Alyssa's disappearance. Well, in response, in this episode, my guest is going to declare her intentions, her motives, and her views. And when she's done, all of you will then understand her own manifesto for a missing girl. And now, a summary of the case. This is brought to you by my friend Megan Goodsite, charlieproject.org. Alyssa Turney, by all accounts, was your average 17-year-old. In the early 2000s, before there was Snapchat and Instagram and all the other gizmos teenagers are now into, she had a job. Did well in school, although she was known to skip occasionally. She had a boyfriend. And yes, she might have smoked marijuana once in a while. All in all, though, a daughter most parents would love to have. However, Alyssa's home life was anything but average. She lost her mother to cancer at a very early age. Alyssa had no connection to her biological father, and her stepfather had a fascination with surveillance, setting up tape recorders on all the phones and cameras on the outside and inside of the house. Under these conditions, Alyssa was preparing to finish her junior year of high school. However, on May 17, 2001, her stepfather Michael unexpectedly picked Alyssa up early from school. She said goodbye to her boyfriend on the way out. From there, she and Michael went to eat, then he took her home. Once reaching there, Michael left her alone to go pick up his own biological daughter at a friend's house. He ran some errands as well. When he and Alyssa's sister returned, Alyssa was gone. There was a note saying goodbye, and the contents of Alyssa's backpack had been dumped out on the floor, but the bag itself was gone. Alyssa was never seen again. There are many factors that have influenced this complex and unsolved 17-year-old case. Some of those issues include: Number 1, the surveillance video running 24/7 at the Turney house seemed to not work the day Alyssa disappeared. Number 2, a phone call allegedly made by Alyssa herself to the Turney house a week later that was not recorded despite all incoming and outgoing calls being taped. And number 3, the allegation by Michael that Alyssa's disappearance is connected to a long-running dispute he had with the local electricians union. However, these points barely scratch the surface, as you will hear. Alyssa's family is not in agreement on what happened to her. All that is known is she has never been seen since the day she disappeared. The guest for this episode is Alyssa's half-sister, Sarah Turney. Unfound news. Unfound has a new business manager. I'm not sure the title is as prestigious as it may sound, but the work this new person will be doing is certainly important. As I've talked about before, she will be trying to reach the right people at SiriusXM, media companies, and elsewhere in an effort to spread Unfound's influence. I'm really happy to bring in someone new. Next, did you go to triblive.com this past Sunday and read Stephen Huber's article about the disappearance of Brianna Hughes? I hope you did. If you didn't, what are you waiting for? You should know that her mother Paula is in the Unfound podcast discussion group. So if you'd like to talk to her yourself, you can do that there. Finally, I will be going over to Orlando next week to see my sister, her husband, her son, and my 2 grandnephews. I don't think it's going to get in the way of anything, like next Friday's episode or the Unfound live show on Wednesdays, but you never know. I will, of course, keep you all posted. Thanks. Where you can find Unfound. Unfound is on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, iTunes, Podomatic, Stitcher, Podbean, and Spotify. Concerning Facebook, please join us on Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern for the Unfound live show on the Unfound page. And once again, I need to give a shout out to all the new followers on the Podomatic app. You can email the program, unfoundpodcast@gmail.com. The website, unfoundpodcast.com. The website at Trib Total Media, triblive.com/news/unfound. Unfound has a Patreon account, patreon.com/unfound. You automatically get access to the private Unfound blog, and you get a free ebook with just a $2 a month contribution. This week, I need to thank Louise, Cheryl, Lynn, and Christine. The PayPal account, unfoundpodcast@gmail.com. Unfound merchandise, volumes 1, 2, 3, and 4 on Amazon in both paperback and ebook form. If you've bought one of them, please give them some nice reviews. And if you'd like a paperback with my signature inside, please contact me privately. The playing cards at makeplayingcards.com/sell/Unfound podcast. And shirts for almost all of Unfound's cases at myshopify.com. Just do a search for Unfound. And please mention Unfound on all true crime Facebook pages and other websites and forums. Thank you. I'm so happy to have on this episode of Unfound the sister of Alyssa Turney, Sarah Turney. Sarah, welcome to Unfound.
Hi, thank you, Ed.
Let's start here. Tell the listeners a little bit about your sister, Alyssa. She was your older sister by how many years or months?
Alyssa was 4 years older than me.
4 years, okay. And were you too close? I mean, being a 4-year difference, was that... you had some brothers as well, but between you and Alyssa, were you close, even though you're 4 years apart?
Yeah, we were extremely close. We were the only 2 children left in the house for a very long time, so we pretty much grew up together alone. So extremely close.
Okay. Did you share some interests, similar interests, or I guess you would have been 13 when she disappeared, 12 or 13. Same interest in music. What was she into? Things like that.
Yeah, I was 12 and she was 17, and Alyssa was kind of alternative, but then had a really sweet side. You know, she wore the big raver pants with a Care Bear shirt or a Rainbow Bright shirt. She listened to Eminem and Marilyn Manson and Nine Inch Nails and Rage Against the Machine. So again, alternative, but very, very happy. Lots of light coming from her. She loved rainbows and stickers and writing letters and doodling flowers and trying to practice her name. Very girly, but she was strong and stood up for herself and was never pushed around, and she was unique. And I looked up to her so much.
Yeah, okay. Now, something that should be mentioned that may play a factor in all of this is that you and Alyssa do have different fathers, so you're half-sisters. Of course, you have the same mother, but your mother died very young. What happened there? And how did that affect, you think, you and Alyssa?
Yeah, correct. My mother died when I was 4 years old, so Alyssa was about 8 or 9. And it affected us more than I knew at the time. Alyssa really took that role as mother. You know, she taught me how to cook and was the only one in the household that cared about cleaning and keeping a nice house, and that I brushed my hair, and that I looked good when I went to school. She was definitely all of those things to me.
So she was once your mother died. She was kind of your mother, kind of. I mean, maybe not, maybe at 8 years old, but maybe a little older. She would kind of take care of you then.
Absolutely. I mean, I
Hmm.
learned everything about being a woman from Alyssa, so she absolutely took that role at a very young age.
Okay. Now you had some brothers too, correct? Half brothers, full brothers, right?
Yeah, so they're all half.
Mm-hmm.
Alyssa as well, all half to her. So 4 older brothers.
Wow. And what were their ages roughly? We're going back some years now. I'm going to not expect you to do any complex math here, but roughly what were their ages at the time of Alyssa's disappearance in 2001? Roughly.
In 2001, a few would have been in their early 30s. So 2 in their early 30s and about 2 in their early 20s.
Okay, so quite a bit older than her, and definitely a lot older than you if you were 12 or 13. So you had a couple brothers that were almost 20 years older than you.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well,
They spanned of all decades.
okay, well, I have a similar situation in my family where my brothers and my sister are about 20 years older than me, so I know a little bit what that's like. Okay. So, but those brothers, were they living at home at the time, or had they moved out at the time that Alyssa disappeared in 2001?
And they had all moved out. So it was just Alyssa, myself, and our father.
Okay. All right. Now we need to talk about this, and of course, Alyssa's disappearance has gotten a lot of coverage. Of course, you were back you were on 2020, going back or Dateline back 2009. There's been some other podcasts that have devoted a lot of time, multiple episodes to Alyssa's disappearance. But for anybody maybe that is new to this disappearance, we do need to talk about this. Your house was a little unique in that your father, Michael, really believed in video surveillance and telephone surveillance. Can you talk a little bit about that? Can you explain that to listeners? Of course, you were very young. When did you first realize that this was like a thing in your house?
Sure. So yes, there was always a surveillance system on the phone, a passive reporting system that recorded every phone call going out and every phone call coming in. And that had existed since before I was born, so I can't even tell you my first memory of it. It was just always
Huh.
there. We always knew it was recording. And then a few years before Alyssa had disappeared or was gone, my father got video surveillance for the outside of the home. We had something stolen out of our front yard, so he got video cameras. And then
Hmm.
a little bit later, I found out that there was a camera in our living room vent facing our couch.
That you didn't know about.
Correct.
So
He told
you
me
knew about the telephone. So you knew if you were talking on the phone, somebody was listening or could eventually listen if they got the tape. And then you knew about the video surveillance, most of it, but there was one particular camera that you didn't know about.
correct. Yeah, we were unaware that there was a camera in the vent.
Okay. Did you ever have a chance? I understand if your Michael was a little nervous, being that something was stolen out of your front yard, to do that. But did you ever have a conversation with him? Once again, I know you're very young, or even Alyssa did, or maybe some of your brothers, amongst yourselves or with him about. I mean, at some point you had to realize that maybe if you went to somebody else's house, they didn't do things that way. Did you have that kind of conversation amongst yourselves? Hey, this is kind of weird what Dad's doing, or did that never come up?
I mean, it didn't come up between Alyssa and I. We were the only ones living at home. I couldn't speak for what my brothers thought, but I thought it
Mm.
was kind of cool. I thought it was
Hmm.
very technology forward, to be completely honest. We didn't have a lot of things. It was a very modest living growing up. So I thought
Mm.
something like, a computer and home cameras were kind of neat and fancy.
Okay. And so, being that this would have been 90s, at least until 2001, this would have been like VCR tapes, VHS tapes,
Yes,
and
VHS tapes.
VHS tapes, and you'd use them. Would you continue to use them over and over, or would you kind of like stack them up? I mean, did you have like a room where just tapes and tapes and tapes started piling up? Maybe you can explain to the listeners a little bit how that all worked.
Sure. So for the video cameras, no, there was not a pile of tapes. It looked like there were probably just a few that he was recording over. but
Mm-hmm.
definitely not a stash of them. I mean, as opposed to the home phone, where there's decades of small cassette tapes with recordings from the 70s, with me in
Wow.
the 90s calling Blockbuster. So things that were unimportant. And the police, say that they've gone through all those tapes, hundreds and hundreds of hours, if not thousands.
And when you say cassette, when you say that, you mean something like the cassette that, once again, showing my age, back in the day, you could get music on that you could play in your car, something like that.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
What you would record, the radio on when you were a
Okay.
kid. At
Sure.
least when I was a
Okay.
kid.
Sure. Okay. All right. That's unique. And I guess being that this was even before you were born, I guess this was something that your mother went along with. She supported, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't really tell you what her stance was on it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
she's in all the home videos and I assume on all the tapes. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if she thought he was just quirky and that's why she loved him, or if she really saw that as a warning sign. I'm not sure.
Okay. How many cameras would you say, just to give the listeners an idea, how many cameras on the outside of the house and how many cameras on the inside of the house, including the one that you didn't find out about until later? How many do you think?
I'd say 2 to 3 on the outside of the house. I believe it was like, one at the front door, one at the side of the house,
Mm.
and then possibly one in the back. I can't quite remember if it was 2 or 3.
Okay.
And then, yes, just one in the vent.
Just one in the vent. But how
Correct.
many total in the inside of the house, would you say?
Just one inside the house.
Oh, just one so the one that was inside the house was the one you didn't know about.
Yeah, that was the
Okay.
only one we didn't know about. We knew about
Okay.
everything on the outside of the house and on the phone.
Okay, well, we're going to come back to that unknown camera a little bit later in the conversation. Now, the other thing that you'd mentioned to me that was a little bit of hoarding that went on at your house. Once again, was that something that, register? You didn't think that the camera surveillance, you thought that was kind of cool. I suppose maybe if I grew up with that, I might think that was cool too. But uh, for hoarding, must have really taken up some room in the house.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and just going back, I always thought the one in the vent was weird. I never thought that that was
Mm,
cool.
sure, sure,
Just
of
for the
course, of
record.
course, of course, and we'll
Um,
get into that. I'm going to give you all the time to talk about that. Absolutely,
okay.
sure, absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, as far as the hoarding, it got worse as I got older. I mean, by the time I was a teenager and by the time he was arrested, it was completely out of control.
Mm,
But I was also very isolated from the house. I mean, there was tubs and tubs, these huge Rubbermaid tubs of documents, mostly, sometimes tapes, just things from lawsuits. I mean, my mother's X-rays, a newspaper from the day my father was born, just everything you could
mm,
think of in these tubs. And they just acquired. I mean, by the time he was arrested, there were, I believe, 3 or 4 sheds in our backyard. I would joke and call it Shed City.
mm,
But I isolated myself from that. I had the master bedroom. I had my own entrance in and out of the house. I had a mini fridge inside of my room. So I kept my room clean. I would direct my friends directly to my room. And I
mm,
felt as if I kind of lived in a little apartment where I was able to do what I wanted. So I just
mm,
saw it as the mindset of I'm going to get out of here soon. And he's extremely messy and he's gross. And
mm.
yeah, I
Okay,
mean, it was bad.
okay, and we have to remember that Michael is your biological father, but he was not Alyssa's biological father. She had another father.
Correct. Yeah. Alyssa and I share the same mother and have different fathers.
Okay. All right. Um, as you remember it back now, back to 2001, what were some of the things that were going on in Alyssa's life before she disappeared? Maybe we could talk about this. She had a boyfriend, we don't want to use his name, but how long had they been a couple? Did you know him? What
I
was
did
going?
know him. Yeah, he came to the house quite a bit. I want to say they were together less than a year, more than 6 months. But they seemed close and they seemed happy. I mean, there was one fight that my father talks about where he slams his door and drives away really fast. But I mean, that happens when it's young love and it's
Sure,
passionate and you're teenagers. And he always
sure.
seemed kind and respectful and came along on family trips and was at our home all the time.
Okay. And was he like in the same grade? He was in high school with Alyssa? He wasn't like she was 17 and he was like 25. It wasn't anything like that.
No, they went to the same high school. I couldn't tell you for sure if he was a junior or a senior, but
Mm,
one of those.
okay. And so to this day, now that you're a grown woman, you think he was a pretty good guy, her boyfriend? You think?
I do. I mean, even friends come back and say that, he never really dated again for many, many years and was always really hurt and destroyed by this, and that she was
Mm,
his first love, and he thought they were going to get married and have babies and, all those things you dream about when you're 17.
sure.
And I think it really shattered him.
Okay. We're gonna talk about him a little later. You had mentioned to me also, was there something going on with Alyssa maybe thinking about moving or going slash moving to California? Do you have family there? What was all of that about?
Yeah. So our Aunt Lynette, to this day, lives in California. And she says that just a few days before Alyssa went missing, that she had a conversation with Alyssa and invited Alyssa to come live with her. So yeah, we did have ties in California. I think her note
Mm,
kind of points
okay.
to that
We'll
day
get
in
into
that
that.
conversation.
Sure. Sure. Do you get the impression now that she was going to move there and then go for her senior year of high school there, or 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 just move there, go there for the summer permanently? As you think about it on it now, what do you think Alyssa's plans were?
I don't know if she would have really done it, to be completely honest with you. I
Mm,
think she wrote about doing it and that she tried to threaten doing that, but whether or not she really wanted to go, I'm not sure. We were never close with our Aunt Lynette. To not get
mm,
into detail, we were disappointed with her many times as children.
mm.
So I don't know that she would have felt completely comfortable to go out there, but it's possible.
Okay, and this aunt, would that be your mother's sister?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Now, the disappearance day, as far as on the record, was May 17th, 2001, but there was supposed to be a party that night of May 17th. Where was that party going to be? What do you know about that party now that Alyssa was allegedly going to go to?
All I know about that party was that it was a house party to celebrate the end of the year that her friends invited her to, and that Alyssa said she would be at.
Okay. And was this maybe a place that she had gone to parties before? Any idea?
I'm not sure. It
Okay.
wasn't. I don't think that they ever named the friend, and it wouldn't have been anyone that I knew to be her friend.
Mhm. Okay, one more thing before we get into that day for May 17th, 2001. And once again, we're going to cover obviously a lot of this a little later after we cover the facts and everything. But from the outside, once again, looking back at it now as you're a grown woman 17 years later, how would you portray the relationship between Alyssa and your biological father, Michael? From the outs, not
Uh,
what since you found out since then, but at the time, how would you portray it?
at the time, it seemed like he was an overprotective parent to a rebellious teenager.
Mm,
In my eyes, she seemed rebellious for going out and drinking and smoking pot and listening to Marilyn Manson when my dad had scratched up the CD. That seemed really rebellious to me because I was a daddy's girl in the goody two shoes, to be completely honest. But
mm-hmm.
now it's different, of course.
Okay, so there was definitely you and Michael had a little bit different relationship than Alyssa and Michael did. Once again, from the outside, from what the public would see, a little bit different.
Absolutely, we spent a lot of time together. My
Hmm.
father would call me into school once at, or twice a week. I mean, at least. I never had a full week of school. I was always afraid that he wouldn't be there when I came back from school, or that he would run away like he had threatened for my entire life.
Hmm.
So we spent more time together than probably most parents and children. He also didn't work. He was on disability, so he was home all day.
Okay. Okay. So just so we're clear, the listeners understand that what you're saying is that it wasn't unusual for you to miss maybe 2 out of 5 school days, and your
Correct.
father was perfectly fine with that.
Yeah, he would call me out.
Okay. But with Alyssa, it was a little different.
Yeah, she never stayed home from school. Very rarely. She had very good attendance.
Okay. All right. So you had a little bit different relationship, and once again, we're going to get way deep into that a little later. Let's talk about that day, May 17th, 2001. What do you personally, as far as where you were, what you did that day back in 2001, where were you? What'd you do?
Sure. It was the last day of seventh grade for me, so I was in middle school, and we went to a local water park to celebrate. And I believe it spanned about the entire school day. So I had a really fun day with my friends, as far as I was concerned.
Mm-hmm.
But then, yeah, I was returned to school. Sorry, that was weird. We got back to the school, and my father wasn't there, and I walked to a friend's house, and that wasn't totally abnormal. I don't remember being mad at him or anything like that. And then he picked me up pretty promptly. My friends and I smoked some. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, was your father, Michael, supposed to pick you up and then he didn't show up?
Correct. Yeah, he was supposed
Okay.
to pick me up when the buses arrived. He says he was late, but I don't believe that was true.
So you're saying that Michael, your father, was supposed to pick you up at school that day, but he didn't. You walked to a friend's house and he picked you up there. Do you know what time that would have been about that he ended up picking you up?
Yeah, I believe the buses would have gotten there about 3:30 when school ended, and I think he picked me up about 4:35 at the latest.
Okay. Any explanation that he ever gave you as to why? Was that something unusual that he didn't pick you up on time? Did you think that was weird or anything?
No, I mean it didn't alarm me at the time. And no, I don't remember being mad. I don't remember. I don't remember it upsetting me really. But I think it happened probably quite a bit. He was always kind of spacey and would be late, and I walked to that friend's house all the time. So it really wasn't a big deal whether he picked me up at school or at that friend's house.
Okay. Now let's move to what you think you know about Alyssa and what she did that day, as far as what is actually on the record. Whether we are to believe some of these things or not, we're going to get into later. But what were allegedly Alyssa's movements that day?
Sure. So she went to school at the regular scheduled time, I believe about 6:15 for Paradise Valley High School. I went there as well. She got picked up early. We don't know what time. Those school records don't exist anymore, but I'm guessing around 11 or 12 possibly. Before she left, she popped her head into her boyfriend's shop class and said, "Bye, see you later," which I'm assuming is that party that she was expected at.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, we don't know. Supposedly they went to lunch. Alyssa was picked up by her father, taken to lunch. We don't know if they ate there at the house. And then my father says he ran errands, and Alyssa stayed at the house, and that was the last known whereabouts.
And so it was when he went out is when he picked you up?
No, he ran some errands and then came to pick me up.
Okay, ransom. So, just so we're understanding this, Alyssa's at school. Michael, both your father, her father, goes to pick her up at school like halfway through the day.
Correct.
Okay, do you think that was unusual? Had you ever heard about him doing that before?
That was unusual for her, yeah.
Okay. So he's saying they went out to eat, and he dropped her off at home, and then he went out and ran some errands, so Alyssa would have been at home. And is it during the course of running these errands and everything that he finally did come and get you at your friend's house?
Correct. Before he returned to the home, yes.
Okay. And so I'm guessing he might have said something to you about picking Alyssa up early or something. And so he takes you directly home. What happens next?
Sure. So no, he never told me that he picked her up early.
Oh, he didn't. Okay.
No. So I was smoking cigarettes with my friends, which is like my only rule, really, one of my only rules, because our mother died of lung cancer. So we sprayed ourselves silly with perfume. I get into the car thinking I'm going to be in trouble for smoking cigarettes, so he's going to smell it. I'm rolling down the window as fast as I can. But he says, "Can you call your sister? She's not answering her phone," and hands me his cell phone. And I call her a few times. I'm not sure how many times. We got to the home. I entered, found her room, found her backpack, dumped out all over the ground, found the note on her dresser with her cell phone right next to it.
Okay, so he allowed you to go into the house first. You didn't follow him in. Did you have like a garage, or do you park your cars outside in Phoenix, or what did you do there?
Sure, we entered through the carport, so similar to a garage with no door.
Oh, okay.
Entered in. I can't tell you if I entered the home first or if he did, but I entered her bedroom first, which wasn't strange at the time, but of course now he's an ex-police officer and an older adult, and I could never tell you why he would let his 12-year-old daughter enter the house first.
Okay.
But yeah, I entered the scene first.
Okay. So you get home. It's like any other day, kind of. And you walk in, and you're kind of looking around. He's entering the house behind you. You go to her room. Were you expecting to see her in there, or was that just, she share a room, or?
She had her own room, but yeah, I was expecting her to be home and her just to not be answering her cell phone or to have left it somewhere. It didn't seem alarming at all that she didn't answer her phone.
Okay, and when you were trying to call her, was it ringing at all? Or was it going directly to voicemail?
It was ringing.
It was ringing. Okay, it was ringing. So you get there and you come in and you see the backpack. Was the backpack there, or just the contents of it were dropped out?
Just the contents, yeah. They were all scattered all over the ground, and the backpack was missing.
Okay. All right, so you must have thought that was weird. And then where you mentioned a note. Where was the note? And give the gist of what it said.
Sure. So the note was on the left-hand side as you enter on her dresser, a dresser that was handed down in the family that I still have today. And the note said, "Dad and Sarah, when you dropped me off at school today, I decided I really am going to California. Sarah, you said you wanted me gone. Now you have it. Dad, I took $300 from you. That's why I saved my money. Alyssa."
That was the total note, every word of it.
I think I got those two lines out of order, but yeah.
Okay. You're mentioned in that note. Did that part of it ring true to you?
It did, absolutely. We teased each other all the time. I told her she was so unhappy she should leave. I told her that a million times, which is probably my biggest regret today, and it hurts my heart. But those are things we said to each other. She would call me fat and ugly, and I would call her stupid and tell her to leave.
Mm-hmm. And she said that she took $300. Where would she have been able to take $300? Did he have money stashed somewhere in the house that she would have been able to get her hands on that? What did you think when you read the note?
Sure. So I thought that she had taken the money. My father wasn't a huge believer in banks, so he often had large amounts of cash in the house. So I thought that she just took it from him. Okay. But I didn't really think that she would make it far. So I didn't think much of it at the time, to be honest.
So where was this note? Was it put on her dresser, on the kitchen table? Was it taped to the refrigerator? Where was it?
Sure. So it was on the left-hand side as you entered her room on top of her dresser, right next to her cell phone.
And her cell phone was sitting there?
Correct.
So that's why it was ringing and nobody was answering it, because it was sitting there?
Correct.
Okay. When you looked at the note, did it seem like it was her handwriting? I mean, once again, from you being a 12-year-old, I know you're not a handwriting analyst, but it did look like her writing to you.
Yes, it did. I mean, there was one exception. Her name, when she writes her name, she uses a very large lowercase a, and in this instance, she used an uppercase a. Not a big thing, but it did seem kind of weird at the time. Like I mentioned, I wanted to be just like her, so I wanted to have handwriting as pretty as hers, and it was just something I noticed.
Okay. So the contents of her backpack, but not her backpack, all over her room. You see the note there. You see her cell phone sitting there. Anything else in the house that maybe seemed a little strange? That now, once again, as a 12-year-old, I know you're in that mindset, but now as a woman, you look back and see anything else in the house that seemed a little off-kilter?
No, nothing in the house seemed off-kilter. Everything seemed exactly the same.
Okay. So there was no signs of a break-in, nothing like that?
No.
No. Okay.
So you found the note. How did your father, Michael, react when he saw the contents of the backpack on the floor and the note and the cell phone? How did he react?
I don't remember his face or what he said right there in the moment, but he started calling people right away, asking if they knew where she was.
Okay. So who do you think some of those people would have been that he called?
Her friends, parents of friends, her boyfriend, I believe, right then and there.
All right, so he got on the phone and was making a variety of phone calls trying to figure out if this was something real or is this just a teenager, maybe he's having some sort of tantrum or something like that. Maybe she's just threatening to do something and making it look like something that it isn't. Did either of you happen to pick up her phone to see if she had possibly made any calls while Michael was out running errands and you were at the water park and waiting for him to pick you up? Did you look at the phone and try to see if she contacted anybody or texted anybody?
I didn't. I didn't panic at all. I didn't think that she would never come back. I thought for sure she was at a friend's house and would be back that night. So no, I didn't pick up her phone and try to look for anything. I'm not sure if my father did either, but I know we don't have those records.
Okay.
So it's not something that he tried to keep or look into.
Okay. Had she ever done anything like this before, like threatened to run away and then went for a few days and then came back? Anything like that?
No, nothing where she was really gone overnight. There's stories about when she was a kid that she would say she's running away and she would walk halfway down the street and walk back. And I did the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But nothing major, no.
Okay. Were any of your neighbors, being that this was just broad daylight, Phoenix, Arizona, in May, go to the neighbors, see if they saw anything? Did he go over there? Maybe you went over there. Did anybody in the neighborhood see anything?
I'm not sure if my father ever talked to the neighbors. I didn't go over there, but no, they've never reported seeing anything, but they weren't interviewed for 7 years or so.
They weren't. Okay. Yeah, once again, we'll get to that a little bit and why that might have been. So he's calling people. I guess most importantly, if we're to believe that, she took off on her own, wrote this note, took some money, took her backpack, but not the contents in it. Maybe she put some clothes in there or something. Being that you had this video surveillance on the outside of the house and at least this one camera inside, once again, that you didn't even know about, not even at this time, did your father ever go to those videotapes to check and see, what exactly happened, if the note was telling the truth?
He says a few different things. He says that the cameras weren't on to some people, and to other people he says that he had a recording and there was nothing on it, and so he threw it away or taped over it.
Okay.
So I'm not sure.
All right. If he had a tape and taped over it, as you said, and like you said, you've already stated that it's not like you were hoarding VHS tapes, you would kind of reuse them over and over. Had he ever shown you a videotape of Alyssa leaving that day?
No, I've never seen a videotape.
Never. Okay. And once again, you said he told people a couple different stories. So we don't have any. So either we're not sure what to think there. When did it become obvious to you and maybe your father, and did your brother? Maybe we should go here. Did your brothers know anything about this? Did he call them and say, "Hey, heard from Alyssa"? Anything like that?
I'm honestly not sure. I know that no one came over that night. None of my brothers came over to look for her or to talk to him in person. Mm-hmm. It was just us.
Okay. What did you do for the rest of the day? This would have been maybe roughly 5 in the afternoon into the evening. It was just you and your father, Michael. What did you two do?
Sure. So for me, it was business as usual. I wasn't fazed by it. I remember I slept in her bed that night and every night that summer. But he just called people as far as I remember. He didn't really go look for her either. He didn't leave.
Okay. Never drove out, never jumped in the cars. Once again, as far as you can remember, drove around the neighborhood, nothing like that.
No, nothing.
Okay. Did he call your aunt in California to say, hey, did you know anything about Alyssa going out to see you? You have any ideas?
I believe she says that he called a few days later,
Mm.
but not that night.
Okay. So you have this note. You have the contents of the backpack on the floor. I'm sure you probably cleaned that up at some point. You have her cell phone, and that's that day. That's what essentially went on for you and your father, Michael, that day. He's claiming that while he was out doing things and then picking you up, somehow Alyssa wrote this note. It's in her handwriting, and she took off.
Correct.
That's the story. Okay. What went on the next few days, and at what point were there any searches? Did he finally get to talk to your brothers about this, and when did the police get involved?
So the police never got involved. That didn't happen until about 8 years later in 2008 and 2009.
All right. So just to interrupt, just so we're clear, there was no missing persons report ever filed in 2001. To your knowledge. To your knowledge.
No, I believe it was a runaway case. It was reported as such, as opposed to a missing persons case.
Okay. And do you believe it was you, or it wasn't you, but was it your father who then kind of let the police know, or was this kind of just something that eventually kind of just got out to the public because nobody saw Alyssa anymore?
No, he called and said that his daughter ran away to her aunt's house in California.
That's what he said to the police. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. And did he do that the next day, or did he wait a few days?
I believe it was that night around 10 or 11 p.m.
Okay. All right. So that day that she disappeared is when he called, and wasn't actually filing a report, but he was just saying, hey, I have this note here. I think my daughter, 17-year-old, ran away.
Correct.
All right. No police. So no police ever showed up to your house to take an official writing anything down or anything?
No.
Wow. Okay. So what went on after the popular belief? I mean, did you think, frankly, that she ran away at 12 years old? What did you think?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I definitely thought she ran away.
Okay. So what went on over you get into the summer, haven't heard from her. Is your father doing anything? What was the tone? What was the feeling around the Turney house that summer?
Sure. I mean, he put a lot of urgency around it. He made a flyer almost immediately and started posting them around the city and started handing them out at the mall and had them on his dashboard and talked to everyone at every store about it. And he made several trips to California that summer.
So it looks like he was trying to do things, even though there's no official missing persons report filled out. He seemed to be doing things on his own. Maybe other people were helping him. That a lot of parents do when they have a younger child that goes missing, posting flyers, talking to people, etc.
Absolutely. I mean,
Okay.
But he did tell the family, that he thought that she was taken by someone or driven by someone and that something bad happened to her. He didn't tell us that he thought she ran away to our aunt's house in California.
Okay, so he tells the police one thing, but he was telling you and other family members something else.
Correct.
All right, so maybe somebody came and got her, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Okay, so for you, how did your life change in any way once Alyssa went missing?
I think it affected me more than I knew at the time. But that summer, I spent every night at my friend's house partying. I mean, drinking and doing all the things you shouldn't do when you're 13 years old. And it was, in a weird way, it was like I wanted to almost be Alyssa. I would wear her clothes, and I slept in her bed every night. And I did all the things I said I would never do, like smoke pot and drink. And yeah, I mean, it was definitely a coming out of sorts that summer for me. I'd done things I'd never done before.
Mm-hmm.
But I I guess I tried not to think about her as I think about it now, like just that she would be back is all I thought. Don't worry, she'll be back. There's no way this is happening. There's no way that she's not going to come back for you, that she's not going to come back in general.
Okay. I do have to ask one thing about the school. Being that you were missing so much school, did any administrator ever call your father in to talk to him about, hey, you know what's going on here? Anything like that ever happen?
No, you'd think that they would, and that never happened. And I mean, I did some horrendous things at school. Not to the point where I was suspended or expelled, but showing up high and showing up 2 days a week. But I also would go back after days I missed, and I would attend academic decathlon. So it seemed like a cry for help, but no one ever did. I mean, I dropped out with close to a 4.0, and I had to go to the community college and ask, how do I go to college? There was literally no one involved in my life in that aspect, not in school, not in personal life. It was all on my own.
And your father wasn't guiding you on that either?
No.
Okay. So did you just say that you'd skip school, and then you'd go to extracurricular activity after school?
Yeah, because I wanted to learn, but I thought the system was failing me. I thought I wasn't learning anything. I went to my first day of senior year, and I was handed a crossword puzzle, and I said, I'm not doing this. And I dropped out. My dad came into my room, and he said, are you going to go to school today, or you just want me to drop you out? I said, let's go drop out. And I went down, and they said, well, don't you have friends and extracurricular activities? And I said, no, all my friends are on the west side, and I'm not learning anything here, and I want to go to college. And they let me drop out. And then I immediately enrolled in the community college, and yeah.
Okay. All right, so that was that summer. Of course, Alyssa does not return. Your father, Michael, looking into this, do you remember your brothers ever saying, did they ever help? Did they ever offer you an opinion as to where she might have gone and what might have happened? Your older brothers, being that they were into their 20s and early 30s.
Right, no, we didn't really talk about it. And it wasn't that we weren't supposed to talk about it. It never came up. They never expressed those things to me. We never helped our father. We all thought she'd be back.
Okay. All right, now let's get into the rest of this case, and it's very involved, very complex, and certainly disturbing. One of the interesting points that you told me that, once again, I know this case has been covered elsewhere, was that even though kind of the facts were known about Alyssa's disappearance, what I was stunned to find out that you didn't even know until early 2009 that Alyssa had actually gotten out of school early the day she disappeared. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Can you explain that? That would seem to be something that maybe your father would, well, I went and got her out of school early, and we went to lunch. He never told you any of that in those 8 years after she disappeared.
No, he never told anyone in the family. We all found out from the ABC 2020 special in 2009.
Okay. So he kind of kept that from everybody. But even on top of that, as well as Alyssa's disappearance was known, there were no teachers or school administrators, principal, who ever mentioned to anybody, even when I realized that you eventually dropped out, but you were going to the same school at least for a while. None of them even said to you as a 13-year-old, 14-year-old, 15-year-old, your sister left early that day that she disappeared with your father. None of them ever said that to you.
No, no one told me anything. The school never had any type of ceremony or mentioned her.
Can once again, as an adult now, can you look back on it? Do you think that's strange, or what do you think was going on there? Because that seems to be a fairly important piece of information.
Absolutely. I mean, I feel that he wasn't telling us because he knew that would make him look extremely suspicious. And I think the school system failed my sister and I many times. Alyssa reported to a teacher that my father was dating, that she had sex with our father. And she didn't report that to the state. I mean, she was continuously failed. She was crying out for help way more than I ever knew.
All right. We're going to talk about that very shortly. Because once we get into that, that's going to be a very deep conversation. Okay. So the school never said anything to you about that day. It seems that no teacher ever went to the police and said, you know what, that day that she disappeared, her father picked her up early. Nobody did anything. At least once again, to your knowledge. To your knowledge.
Correct. No, not to my knowledge.
Okay. When did you find out, you'd already mentioned it, but we're going to talk about it now, this secret camera that was installed on the interior of your house? How did you find out about it, and how long was it in there? What can you tell the listeners about it?
Sure. So it was, not long before Alyssa was gone that my father pulled me aside and said, hey, look at this. And it was a video, with the angle from the camera in the vent of Alyssa on the couch making out with a boy. And I forgot how the rest of the conversation went. I'm not sure if he was asking me about it or just telling me about it, but that's how I found out.
And did you tell Alyssa as soon as you saw that videotape?
I can't remember if I did or not, to be completely honest.
Okay.
I wish I did.
Mm-hmm. Maybe you did, you just can't remember. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't, we don't know. Okay. So he had this secret, did he ever tell you how long it's been there? When you saw it, did you think, man, I hope he didn't catch me doing anything on that tape? What was your reaction?
I remember thinking, oh, that's, different. I don't remember thinking it was weird or anything like that. All the surveillance was pretty normal to me. But yeah, I don't know how long it had been there, but it was a fairly new house. We'd moved a lot, so we hadn't been in that house for very long. So it couldn't have been there for years, if you will.
Okay. So if she disappeared in May, do you think it was in there since the beginning of 2001?
Possibly, yeah.
Okay. So there is a videotape. There was this secret camera that he never told anybody about until he showed you that particular video of Alyssa making out with, I don't know if it was her boyfriend or somebody else, not long before she disappeared. Did your father continue to do the taping of both phone calls and the vent tape or the vent camera after Alyssa disappeared?
No, after Alyssa was gone and I was becoming a teenager, I told him that I didn't want the camera on the vent anymore, and he took it down. He also went as far as to buy me a camera detector device that would beep if there was a camera around, to kind of, prove, in his words, that he wasn't spying on me.
That's an interesting device. I didn't even know this existed. And in fact, you told me that the setup, at least as I understand it in the house, was that the VCR or VCRs that were recording all this were in the master bedroom where Michael slept. But then after Alyssa disappeared, at some point, he just put you in charge of everything, and you guys essentially switched bedrooms.
Correct. I want to say it was after that summer he moved me into the master bedroom. He said he didn't want me walking around in a towel and people thinking that, he was molesting his daughters. So I had the master bedroom, but, that's not what I was thinking of when my father gave me the master bedroom. I was just really excited. And yes, the video monitors stayed in there. And at that point, I had complete control over all the video monitors.
Okay. Did you continue to use them, or did you just kind of say, this is just weird and stop doing it?
I used them to see when he was coming home.
Okay. For your own intended uses. Okay, I understand, like any teenager would do. Okay.
Yeah, so it was to my advantage to have those in my room.
Yeah. And you'd already stated that it was like your own apartment. You had your own entryway, and own bathroom, and own refrigerator. You had even no use of even going in the rest of the house.
Not in that particular room.
Oh, okay.
Because we had moved across the street, but I had the master bedroom. I didn't have my own entrance. But yeah, I had my own bathroom. I would come out for very little. But yeah, it was kind of the first stage of that.
Okay, and you're saying that sometime after that you moved out of that house where Alyssa disappeared?
Correct. Probably within a year, I'd want to say. We were renting that home, and we moved directly across the street, and my father bought that home. He said he wanted to stay close to see if Alyssa would come back, but I was moved directly into the master bedroom, and the video monitors remained in the living room at that point.
And so did somebody move in? Did you rent that? The owners of the house took that house back, I guess, and rented it to somebody else? Is that what happened?
Correct. Yes, I believe 2 to 3 people lived there by the time my father was arrested.
Okay. Did the continuing of the phone calls continue in the new house?
Yes.
They did?
Yes.
Okay.
So the video surveillance on the outside as well as the phone call recording system continued.
Okay. All right. But like you said, you were in control of all of it then, kind of.
Well, in the new house, it was in the area, in the living room.
It was in the common area. Okay. So, okay, I understand. Okay. Now there's something else. Michael claims that Alyssa actually called sometime after she disappeared. What can you tell the listeners about this?
Sure. I can tell you it is a phone call that actually happened. We do have a record from AT&T that the phone call was placed. I can't tell you if it was Alyssa. I don't believe it was her. But it's, one more piece of recording that we happen to not have that's very important. So in addition to not having the video recording of the day she left, we also don't have the audio recording of this supposed phone call. Very coincidental.
Okay. How long do you think this was after she disappeared?
I believe it was just about a week.
Just a week later. But did you say that somewhere there is a record of a call being made? Somehow you have that? Do you have records of that?
I don't know if I have it in my possession, but it is something that the police have confirmed and that they've seen. My father sued AT&T at the time to get the records.
Mm-hmm. And any idea where this phone call was made from, how long it lasted? And is Michael claiming that he answered the phone when Alyssa called, or was it a message, or what was the situation?
Sure. So it was early in the morning, I believe in a city in California that was close to the border of Arizona. And yeah, I'm not sure of the duration. My father says a few different stories about what she said, but I don't believe that it happened. I don't think it was her.
But once again, the police are saying that some kind of phone call was made at that time, allegedly that day a week later. Allegedly.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
And I believe I could go to any gas station on the planet and convince someone to call me from a payphone at a certain time for a certain amount of money.
Okay, that's a good point. Okay, but most importantly, like you said, all this taping of phone calls, and that's a particular phone call that didn't get recorded.
Correct.
Okay. Let's talk about the note, because as you stated, it's in her handwriting, as far as you can tell. You said that the A, maybe at the beginning of her name, was maybe a little off, but it looked like her handwriting, talking about going to California. Do you believe that it was written that day? I mean, knowing your sister the way you do and everything that was going on, how would you explain that note?
Sure. So no, I don't believe it was written that day. I believe that note was written on the day that she had the conversation with our aunt, where she offered for Alyssa to come out to California for the next school year. I think it was that day she spoke to my aunt, wrote the note, maybe presented it to my father, I'm not sure. But I think that note is definitely from a different day, and it became, a part of an opportunity for my father to cover this all up.
Okay. Do you believe that any of that note was written on the day that she disappeared?
I believe that the note at the end, Dad, I took $300 from you, Alyssa. I think that was possibly written on that day, possibly that he made her. If you look at it, the rest of the note is lined up very neatly, and that particular line tends to skew off the line. And again, it's not a huge thing, but it's just a little something kind of weird.
Okay. So that could explain that note was written on a different day, under different circumstances. Maybe, of course, it means what's written there, but it might have been a forecasting of her moving, of her going to California, and it didn't mean that she was going on that particular day.
Right, and that would also excuse the fact that she didn't take the money that she saved, that she wrote about in the note, that she never took that out of her bank account. So by my father possibly asking her to write, I took $300 from you, that was his excuse. Well, She didn't take the money out because she stole money from me. Cash that's not detectable or traceable.
Okay. All right, so there are plausible explanations that we think we see a note with her handwriting on it. That doesn't mean it's that day. We don't know. It could have been written some other day, and you just didn't have. She had it hidden like in a notebook or somewhere, and you just didn't happen to see it.
Correct.
Okay. Let's talk about your father, your biological father. Once again, Michael Turney was Alyssa's stepfather, but he is your biological father. Um, can you explain, once again, you as a teenager living with him, can you explain his personality to the listeners?
Yeah, I mean,
Because we have to understand something. I mean, let's just get this out of the way for the listeners that don't know. If you don't have the feelings so far, if you're listening to this, obviously Michael Turney could be seen as a suspect, person of interest in Alyssa's disappearance. I think that's the way the questioning and the things are going so far. But the listeners should know that for at least 8 years, you defended your father, Michael. Okay? The listeners should know that. You've changed within the last decade, your opinion, and we're going to get into that. But in that time, between 2001 and let's say roughly 2009, and even him being your father, how would you explain his personality, how he got along with others, how he got along with you, how he got along with the neighbors, etc.?
sure. I mean, he was extremely easygoing and friendly and had very long conversations with anyone and everyone about any topic you could want to think of. To me, it was extremely annoying, but he was very charismatic and charming and manipulative and did many great things for me and for my friends. I mean, people would come to our house because it was a good environment to be in. You know, my house had the snacks and we had all the video games and all the soda and the fun things. And my dad would always give us a ride to the mall. We would never have to take the bus. He would always pick us up anytime we wanted. Yeah, I mean, he seemed like a good dad at that point.
Okay. And he was such a good dad that he didn't make his daughter go to school.
Correct. I mean, when you're younger, you don't see it that way.
Sure. Yeah. It's like, all right, I don't get to go to school. Now we know that it's not the greatest in parenting, but it certainly can be a good time. And friends coming over to your house. None of your friends, to your knowledge, ever had a problem with him? Anything like that?
So, I mean, at first, no. Nobody had a problem with him. He would buy us the beer. But I had a friend move in when I was about 16. One of my best friends, she was a female, and they got extremely close. And I was really jealous of that relationship. They would do things alone. They would go to movies and go to dinners, and I wasn't invited. And I would take that extremely personally and get upset, you know, and even tell him that he loved her more. So now that I look back, I think that was extremely strange. But outside of that, no, he was that dad that bought the beer and gave you the ride and didn't tell your parents.
Okay. Do you think that any other parents ever found out about how he was doing some of these things he shouldn't? Did they ever give him a hard time, to your knowledge?
No.
You know, I'm just speaking from my parents, fairly strict, maybe a little bit the opposite of the way your father was. And I know that if I was at some party as let's say a 14-year-old, and there was beer being served to 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, and my parents found out about it, they would be getting that other parent on the phone, for sure. That's just the way Ed and Loretta Dentzel are to this day. But you don't know that ever happened in anything that you ever heard about in your life.
No. I mean, I grew up with a lot of friends from the West Side, and they were in similar circumstances to me where we didn't have the best of parents. So, you know, for example, another friend's mom threw my 17th birthday party for me and bought all the liquor and made us Jell-O shots and taught us how to shoot them. So that's
okay. Okay. All right, and you've already said that he didn't work. He was on disability. What was the nature of this disability that happened to him? What happened?
Sure. So I can't tell you officially what it was on paper, but he said that his left leg was damaged beyond repair when it was hit by a ladder at work during a work accident. But then he also had major depression, in which they ordered him psychiatry appointments, I believe, 2 or 3 times a week. So I couldn't tell you what it was on paper, but I believe it was a combination of those two things.
do you think that now that you look back at it now, once again, as an adult, do you think those things were actually true, or was he just trying to milk the system?
I think he could have worked. I think he was completely capable of working. He would do 100 pull-ups and 100 push-ups and 500 sit-ups.
Okay.
So I think he was able to work, yes.
Okay, and what job did he have that he got hurt when it's the latter?
He was an electrician.
Okay. All right, and he got hurt. And how long was he on disability before Alyssa disappeared?
I believe since 1996, so what, 5 years?
About 5 years. All right, and you said that he suffered from depression. Do you think that had anything to do with your mother dying years before?
Yes, I think that's a huge part of him breaking. That was definitely one of the major points in his life that turned him ill, I believe.
Mm-hmm. All right, so he and your mother, how long were they married, I should ask, before, like I said, you already said that she died from cancer when you were 4 years old. How long were they married before she died?
I think it was less than 5 years. Okay. I mean, just about, right after right before they had me.
Okay. And your opinion is, once again, you became a teenager, that you believe that your father, Michael, still very much loved your mother, even though she wasn't here anymore. It really affected him.
Oh, absolutely, yes. He was never the same, according to the whole family.
Okay. So you had the disability that happened. If it happened in 1996, must have happened right around, some years after your mother, I guess, your mother died, 5 years before Alyssa disappeared. But that wasn't the end of his. He had a kind of beef with the electrical union. We'll get into what happened later in 2009, 2010. But what was the beef that he had with them, even though he was getting disability?
Sure. So it's a few different things from what I've heard, and this spans back to before I was born, into the 1970s. He says that, they harassed him for being a whistleblower, in his words, for reporting unsafe working conditions. And that ever since then he was teased and harassed. And, to his credit, my brothers do remember getting harassing phone calls. They do remember my father, getting in a fight with some gentleman in a parking garage that was supposedly from the union. So things have happened, but I don't think it went to the extremes that he says. He also says that during his work accident that shattered his knee for a very long time, that was them doing it on purpose. They purposely hit him with a ladder trying to kill him, in his words.
Okay, so he was kind of a guy that was, we know that at least now in the United States we have these whistleblower laws regarding government and all sorts of different situations. But he was trying to let somebody know, maybe his higher-ups, or maybe even tried to go to the media or something, about things that were being done in his his electrical work, being in the union, and there were guys that were giving him a hard time because of that.
Yeah.
They thought that they might lose their jobs because of it, or somebody's going to get fined, something like that.
Exactly.
Okay. Anything ever come of that? Did he file any lawsuits or anything like that where he won any money for whistleblowing, to your knowledge?
He always said that he had a big lawsuit against the union, but I don't believe he ever won.
Okay. All right, and this goes back to the 70s, but like you said, he actually didn't get hurt, at least to the point where he could file for disability, until 1996. So it had been still 20 years of working in the electrical union, even though he said he was getting harassed.
Correct.
Okay. All right, we should need to go over this again. The story that he told the police as to what he believed happened to Alyssa, was different from what he told family. Could you once again detail those two different stories?
Absolutely. When he called to report Alyssa missing, he said, my teenage daughter got mad at me and ran away to her aunt's house in California. So no urgency. But on the other hand, when he, came to the family, he said, well, I really think some guy could have taken her. It was a guy that worked at her school. Something could be really wrong. So there was a lot of urgency with the family and absolutely none with the police. and he's smart. He's former law enforcement. He knows how to report someone in such a way that it will induce a search, and he knows how to report it that they won't look into it. He knows these things.
Okay. So, and you said he was former law enforcement. We're also going to get into that in a bit. But there were two distinct stories telling the police, she ran off. If you see her, let me know. But then his family, it's like, I think somebody took her.
Yeah.
Okay. We're now going to get into this relationship that Michael had with Alyssa, because it was different in many ways with the way Michael and you got along. But first I wanted to talk about this. Being that Michael was not Alyssa's biological father, did Alyssa have any interaction with her actual biological father?
No, never. He was abusive before my mother got with my father, and he was never in her life at any point.
Okay, never, to your knowledge, ever called her, ever stopped over, and to your knowledge, Michael and he never met?
No, my father and him had met. They had a dispute over him seeing Alyssa because he was abusive. And reportedly, he tried to run my father over with his car. There's actually a picture of my mother standing on the neighbor's lawn pointing to a spot of grass where she says that he came up over the lawn and tried to run my father over.
Run Michael over. Wow.
Correct. So they met and obviously did not get along.
And what year would that have been? Was that several years before Alyssa disappeared, or?
Yes. I mean, that would have been 1986.
Oh my.
I
Okay.
believe before I was born, when Alyssa was just an infant.
Okay. All right. So several years. And to your knowledge, Alyssa never had any relationship with her biological father. There's no chance that she would have ever run off to see him or anything like that.
Never, no. I remember her being sad, that he was never around.
Okay.
She had mentioned it many times.
Okay. Let's talk about Michael and Alyssa. Did you realize at the time when you were 12, that it seems that he had different expectations for Alyssa than he did for you? Would you say that that's accurate?
Yes.
Okay. Did he ever explain that as a father? Well, this is the reason I do these things with Alyssa, but then there's reasons I allow you to do the things you do. Did he ever explain that, when Alyssa was around before she disappeared?
He did. He said that Alyssa was rebellious and forgetful and needed guidance, and that she had ADD and needed extra help, and she was naive. He always thought that she could be tricked into anything, and would say that all the time. And he said that I made very good decisions and wasn't easily manipulated, and that was his reasoning for why I had so much freedom and she had none.
Did you think that was the truth, him saying that? Once again, I know you're just 12 or 13 at the time she disappeared. Was that your assessment of your older sister, or do you think that he was blowing that out of proportion?
I did think that she was a bit forgetful. I did think that, she was rebellious because I hadn't rebelled myself at that time. But I do remember her having a good memory. And I've always said that, I believe she had a better memory than I did. I think that I blocked out a lot of things. But she could always remember things I couldn't. But there were times, when she would come to me and ask me to read a book for her and do a book report, and I was 4 years younger. So there were those times too. But I don't think it was as bad as he said. People said that she could balance her cash drawer at work and that she got good grades and she had good attendance. So she couldn't have been that bad.
Okay. Now, we've talked about, but it is also public knowledge at this point. Once again, I realize that you've already talked about a national TV show covering this disappearance back in 2009, about these contracts that Michael made Alyssa sign. Did you know about that at the time when she disappeared at 12 or 13 years old? And, what did you think of all of that?
Yeah, I do remember her having to sign a contract, actually. And I don't think I thought a lot of it. My father was very litigious. He was suing everybody left and right and making agreements for this and making agreements for that. Every time my brothers would borrow money, they would sign a little agreement for him. Now, obviously, it's very strange. But at the time, I didn't think it was that strange. At one point, I remember he took big poster boards and posted all her rules on the wall. And it was nothing insane. It was, tell dad where you're going, be home before dark, things like that. But yeah, I mean, posting it on the wall like that is strange and very belittling.
Mm-hmm. How many contracts? I mean, I know it's been some years and everything. How many contracts do you think that he made her sign over the course of her teenage life?
I'm not sure.
Many.
At least one.
At least
one. I hear different numbers from different people, and but yeah, I mean, she had to sign a contract saying that she was never molested by him or abused by him, and that's disgusting and insane.
Okay. When was the first time you even heard about him allegedly abusing Alyssa?
Not until so when the police brought me in the day that the house was raided, they did.
You're gonna have to put this in. So you have to put this in the timeline for the listeners, okay? So she disappears in 2001. You two are living together. You move across the street to another house. It's just the two of you. And at some point, you dropped out of school. You went to college. He's continuing to do this thing. So I'm guessing if you stayed in high school, you would have graduated in 2006 or something?
Correct.
2006. So it's just you and him in that house for those years.
Yes, we were alone.
Okay, just the two of you. Maybe your brothers weren't living with you. They were stopping over, maybe once in a while to see him, hang out, just doing regular family stuff. Maybe I should ask you this: does Alyssa's name come up very much during those years?
No, not very much at all.
Was he still trying to post posters and talk to anybody, or did that kind of tail away after a time after 2001?
It definitely went away after a while. I mean, not completely. It would come up, it was a part of his victim story, if you will. His daughter's now missing, in addition to all the other horrible things that have happened in his life. But he wasn't advocating for it, no.
Okay. Did the local media talk to him? Did he do any stories with local media? Maybe let's just pick a year 2004 about her disappearance?
No, not at all. He'd never done any type of media. We'd never been interviewed by the police. All he did was, create the flyers and visit California.
Did he ever say to you during that time that, man, I don't think Alyssa's coming back. I don't think she's going to pop up. I really thought she ran away and maybe she's gone for good. Ever say anything like that?
I don't think so. Not outright, but he would show me things. There was a forensic file of a woman who was burned in a dumpster, and he would show me things like that. So I kind of came to the conclusion that everyone thought Alyssa was dead except me at that point. I was the very last person to think that she was dead. I held out hope for a very long time.
Okay. In any of that time, and once again, we already stated that you were defended him, even though maybe there were people around, maybe suspecting him of something. We just don't know. But at any time, did you ever entertain the idea that your father could have done something to Alyssa during those years between 2001 and roughly 2009?
Never. Not once.
Not once. Okay. So now we come back to the question I originally asked you. When did you first hear about him allegedly, once again, allegedly, because he's never gone to jail for it or anything, allegedly abusing Alyssa?
Sure. The very first time I heard it was when the home was raided in 2008. When I went down to the police station and they sat me down and said, "We don't have any news about your sister. We're raiding your home. We think that your father killed her, and we think that he sexually abused her." And I believe, they told me some other things, and I believe my exact words were, "Am I free to go? I need to call my brothers." But I never believed it. I didn't believe that they were telling the truth. I thought that they were trying to scare me into saying bad things about my father. And it took me a long time to come around. It took ABC 2020 and the whole world screaming in my face that that's possibly what happened. It took a lot for me to come around and believe it.
Okay.
I was very naive.
Okay, we're going to talk about that raid in a bit, but we just need to put this on the record. Has Michael Turney ever spent any time in jail? Has he ever been charged with anything regarding the abuse of Alyssa?
No, not one thing.
Okay. Have the police or anybody ever been able to show you any proof that that actually happened?
Letters from Alyssa.
Okay.
Testimony.
Okay. Where did these letters come from? Who was she sending them to? How were they found? I guess I should say this, how did Michael not find them, or were they hidden in your house? How did that all happen?
Sure. So the one particular letter I'm thinking of was written by Alyssa, and she mailed it to a friend after they weren't allowed to see each other anymore. So he would have never seen it because it was mailed directly to her.
Okay, and what year would this have been that she did this, that Alyssa did this?
It would have been the summer of her sophomore year, so 2000.
All right, so a full year before she disappeared, she sent this letter. Was this a friend in another state, or why would she send it as a letter? Why wouldn't this have been something that she told her in person, or him in person?
Sure. It was a friend who lived across the city, just on the east side, but neither of them had vehicles, and they weren't allowed to see each other. So they kept in touch via mail. There was no text messaging a whole lot back then.
Okay. And so is there a reason that this person, once they got this letter, didn't go to the police, or did that happen, or?
No, she never went to the police.
Have you ever talked to this person, asked her why she didn't follow up on it? Once again, I have to ask these questions, Sarah. So, if somebody's going to say that they have a letter that Alyssa said she was being abused, I start wondering why somebody didn't do anything about it. I just have to ask.
No, absolutely. And I think the same thing. That's the first place my mind goes to. She's spoken about it before, and she regrets it.
Mm-hmm.
She was very young. She was also 16 or 17 at the time and didn't quite know what to do.
Okay. So she never showed it to her parents, or some person in a position, an adult in a position of authority, a teacher, somebody like that?
No, I don't believe so. And in the letter, Alyssa begs her not to tell.
Yeah.
She begs her because she says that she'll be separated from me. And, that's heartbreaking.
Okay. You said that that's just one letter. How many letters would you say that you know about where Alyssa talked about being abused by Michael?
Well, this one friend says that she wrote about it often, in notes in class when they were in the same school, and via the mail when they were separated from each other. But it is from the one friend, but I've seen the letter. But I imagine that she told other friends. Other friends state that she did.
Okay. But despite all of that, he's never been charged with anything. How did the police know? I mean, if you didn't know and you were in the same house with Alyssa and something like that was going on, and he and Michael could have been very secretive with Alyssa, I guess that's possible. How did the police find out about it if she's sending letters to these other people? How did the police all put that together? Do you know?
Sure. So the police never found the letters. This friend came forward for the Missing Alyssa podcast, so I'm not even sure the police have seen those letters, to be completely honest with you.
Okay.
I can't remember if she said if they had or not, but she came forward with them. But yeah, as far as no one knowing and how the police found out, I think my brothers, some of them, definitely knew. My oldest brother does have a police interview where he tells a story that Alyssa had told him about them being in a isolated desert area and my father coming on to Alyssa. He tells the police that. So I think a lot more people knew than what they said. And they never told me, which I understand and don't at the same time. I was extremely young, but finding out via the media is not the way I would have liked to found out.
Of course. Would you say that hearing about this, when did you personally find out about the letters? You didn't know about that for a while. What year would you say when you found out about the letters?
I think it was this year or last year.
Oh, very recently.
The update episode came out. Yes.
Very recently.
All the time. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Would you say that when the police said to you about the abuse and everything, is that when you started to change your mind about what could have happened to Alyssa?
It wasn't until 2020 came out that I saw my brother speak about it, that the whole internet community yelled in my face and told me that that was probably the truth. So that's really when I believed. No, I didn't believe the police at first because I believed my father and I was on his side.
Well, okay. So, all right. So there is at least some statements that Alyssa made to others in letters, her own handwriting, that Michael was doing something to her that parents shouldn't be doing with their children. But just to be clear, you were never abused by Michael, and to your knowledge, your brothers were never abused by Michael. Or right, never.
Alyssa was the only one that we believe may have been abused.
Any insight into that at all? Why that might be? I mean, that I don't. I'm not a child psychologist. I'm not an expert in the area, but what do you think about that?
I mean, I think it's the biological factor. He wasn't related by blood. Blood means a lot to my father. And I think he was obsessed with our mother. Growing up, he'd always talk about how much Alyssa looked like our mother, and I was always really envious of that. Everyone said I looked like my father and Alyssa looked like our mother. And I think he became really obsessed after she died. Maybe started this inappropriate relationship possibly and just took it way too far.
And in fact, you kind of look back at it now and think that they didn't really have a father-daughter relationship. It was almost like a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. Even though you didn't know it was going on, but now looking back at it now, the kind of these agreements that they make and everything, would you portray it that way?
Absolutely. I mean, it was definitely like a relationship gone wrong. He talked about her as if she was some type of ex-girlfriend, just with so much hatred and just not a kind light.
And once again, he is not. Alyssa's has none of his genetics because she has a different father. Whereas when you talk about your brothers, those are all Michael's kids.
No, only 3 of the 4 brothers are
okay.
biologically his. So there's one brother that is not his, but he was never abused in any way. He was treated very similar to me in that we had a lot of freedom.
Okay.
And we actually both skipped a ton of school. We kind of compare records to this day and tease each other about who missed more.
Okay. Do you think he was abusing Alyssa while your mother was still alive?
I think it's possible, yeah. There's a report that exists. It's a doctor's report that my mother took us both to be analyzed to see if we were being sexually abused. So that is a report that exists. I don't have a copy, but the producer of the podcast has told me that she found it in this large stack of documents. So I think it's completely possible. At least our mother thought that we were being abused by someone possibly.
And did your mother actually write a letter saying that she didn't want Michael to take care of the kids once she probably knew that she was dying from cancer? Is that true?
That's what my aunts say. I've asked them for a copy, and they said that they will produce it, but I've not seen it yet.
Okay. We have to go to this, being that we're talking about abuse. We know, once again, he has never been charged with anything, so I don't know. There's no videotapes of him doing this, even though you had one secret camera within the house, and you had these cameras outside the house. He's never been charged with any of this. I want to keep saying that for the record, even though we know what Alyssa wrote and everything. But maybe lending at least a little bit of credence to this is a video that's on YouTube. Can you explain what was going on in that video? You look very young in the video. This had to have been some time before Alyssa disappeared. Can you explain it to the listeners if they haven't seen it?
Yes. So I recently found a video going through some old home VHSs that I'm converting to DVDs. And it's a camping trip in the 90s. I believe I was 9. So Alyssa would have had to been 14, possibly 13. And I have the video camera, and I'm recording Alyssa, and I'm recording my father. And Alyssa's kind of far away, and she says, Sarah, look over here. Dad's a pervert. And then my father asks for the video camera back. He snatches it out of my hand. And then he says, and Alyssa is a stupid moron, throws her shoes at her, and then says something about me still having the video camera on.
Mm-hmm. I've seen the video. That's exactly what happened in that video. So you just came across that recently?
Yeah, that was, I mean, I believe I posted it on YouTube the same day I found it. I kind of wanted the whole world to see it because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. But yeah, it was just a few months ago, I believe. And it was shocking and terrifying and horrible.
And are you continuing to go through videos to this day? Are there still like...
I am. And what's really disturbing to me now is that I'm finding that there are a few home videos that have been taped over by TV movies. And I don't mean a few of his favorites. There's one in particular where, my goodness, it's some type of Steven Seagal action movie. And he restarts the movie over and over again. And it's not as if it's multiple copies of the movie. He starts it from the middle. So it's as if he's purposely trying to cover up this tape because he's not trying to get this other movie onto it, if that makes sense. It's kind of clips of this movie as opposed to the whole movie as a run-through that you would actually watch.
Okay. And that's going to be interesting because people don't, VHS technology is so, old now. Of course, when I was growing up, that was the thing. So some people might not even understand the total VHS, VCR thing from like 20 years ago, but that I completely know what you mean. So we have this video that she calls him a pervert, but I'm going to guess in the United States today, just this day that we're doing this interview, there were kids calling their parents perverts for no reason. Just joking around or whatever else. We just don't know. But we, on the other hand, maybe it does go in hand with what Alyssa was saying in these letters and what she was telling other people. And of course, one of your brothers eventually came out and said that he knew something was going on as well. Did your father, once your mother died, did he ever have a serious relationship with another adult woman?
He had one, but she was married to someone else, which doesn't make it that serious in my eyes. But after that, absolutely none. I begged him for a stepmother, and he never dated.
Okay. Need to ask you something else. You said that a friend of yours had come over and stayed with you sometime after Alyssa disappeared. Has that girl ever come forward at any time to say that she might have been abused by Michael?
No. In fact, and this is a childhood friend, someone I've known since we were 7, 8 years old. After my father was arrested, she never spoke to me again.
Huh. Any idea if the police ever spoke to her about anything?
They did obtain an interview with her, yes, in which she was very resistant to speaking with them. Yeah, so I mean, she was very closed and didn't say much in her interview.
Okay. You talked about this raid that was eventually done on your home, but this wouldn't have been the home that the disappearance happened in, where Alyssa was living. This is in the house across the street, correct? This is where the raid happened. Why did that raid happen? I mean, this happened several years after she disappeared, and we know that he didn't file a missing persons report. So what brought that on?
Sure. So, I mean, it's a combination of things, I believe. And it's hard to decipher what the truth is, as most things in the story kind of go endlessly confusing, as I like to say. But, my brother did get arrested and said that he had some facts about my father that they would love to hear. But the warrant was issued for his DNA and anything related to Alyssa. So I don't know if it was my brother telling them something or if they just got this based off the fact that my father wouldn't give DNA and my father wouldn't interview with them. Possibly it was a combination of everything.
Okay, so your brother did something to get arrested, and he kind of, rolled over on your father, so they went over to his house with a warrant, but they discovered a lot of other things when they executed this warrant. Maybe you need to tell the entire story.
Sure, absolutely. So, I mean, the entire story from my point of view is A few days before, I get a call from the police, and they say, we have some really important news about your sister's case, because I was the family contact at this point, so I was who they contacted whenever there was news. They asked me to come down to the station. My pretty much exact words were, I have a Spanish test. Will it take long? And they said, no, come on down. So I went down there with my boyfriend. They took about 30 minutes and sat me down and said, there's no news about your sister. We're raiding your home. We think that your father possibly killed and sexually abused your sister. You also have another sister. What do you think about that? And I said something to the effect of, am I free to go? I need to call my brothers. I called my brothers, had them try to come pick up the dogs, meet me at the house. I got there. There was, I believe, just the Phoenix police at that time. There was a very large amount of police presence. I had to park at the very end of my street. There were so many cars. I walked down there. They wouldn't let me into the house for about, 20 to 30 minutes, in which I'm smoking cigarettes like a crazy person and thinking I'm going to get arrested if I throw the cigarette butt into the street. And I was just frantic. They let me into the home to gather a few things. They say I won't be back tonight, that they have to, search the home. I grabbed dog food and personal things, and in that time I yell at a police officer for asking me about putting tampons in my bag, and yell at them about my dogs, and I'm not very friendly, and they were extremely kind. And then I actually stayed around the neighborhood because they let one of our dogs out. And I was extremely distraught at this point. I remember thinking, okay, I don't care what happens to my dad if I only get this dog back. So I'm actually at the end of the street. And then all of a sudden they have to kind of quarantine it off. And I'm being told that there are bombs in the house. I believe from the news at that point. But yeah, so in this whole transition, the bomb squad wasn't there when I arrived. They came after the fact. But yeah, so I was quarantined off. I found my dog, thank goodness. And then I went to my brother's house for the night. And I watched it all unfold on the news from there.
And what was the whole deal with the bombs?
So yeah, apparently they found a large stash of illegal guns and 26 pipe bombs that were homemade, that were plastic. They said it's the largest illegal gun and bomb bust in Phoenix history. We lived on 34th Street, and they were calling it Disaster on 34th Street because it was very close to Christmas.
Were you living, let me rephrase that. What was he doing? I mean, what was Michael doing with these pipe bombs, and what was he doing?
Sure. I mean, I didn't know about them at the time, but we found out through his manifesto that he was building them so that he could blow up the Union building for revenge for harassing him, revenge for apparently killing Alyssa.
Okay, and we'll get to the Alyssa part in a second. He had a manifesto.
Yes, they found a 90-plus page document called The Diary of a Madman Martyr, and it was all about his life and his plans to blow up the Union.
And this goes back to what we talked about earlier, that he thought that they were after him because of his whistleblowing going back to the 1970s and then culminating with him getting injured on the job in 1996.
Well, I mean, this thing went back to the day he was born.
The story did, but the reason he wrote this manifesto was because of that.
Yes, that was definitely the climax, I would say.
Okay. I'm guessing you had no idea that you already said that you had no idea about the pipe bombs. You had no idea that he was writing this manifesto or any of that.
So I had no idea about the bombs. I knew that he was writing about his life. I didn't realize that was going to become some type of manifesto because I often helped him with the computer, Microsoft Word. It was that he used all the time for his lawsuits and for writing about his life. And I knew he had guns. My whole life, my father and my brothers shot guns, but to this day, I couldn't tell you what a legal gun versus an illegal gun looks like.
Okay. In this manifesto that's 80 or 90 pages and talking about this, including, like you said, what happened to Alyssa. Does he name any names? Does he call out anybody by name in this manifesto if you've had an opportunity to read it?
So he does. I don't believe I've read the whole thing, but I know that he does call out two particular men from the Union. And he claims to have killed these two men in revenge for killing my sister.
Are these men dead, or are they still alive, or did the police look into that? What do you know about that?
Sure. So the police did look into it. These two gentlemen are real people that did work for the union that are now dead, but they died of natural causes. However, they found a Social Security card with a very similar name to one of the gentlemen. I believe the difference was between Gary Wayne Morissette and Gary Wayne Morissetti. And I can't remember which is real and which was on the Social Security card, but yeah, they did find that. So it's all very interesting and confusing.
All right, so what you're saying is, along with all these pipe bombs and everything else, did you find some false documents? They found. I should say they found. The police found false documents.
Correct. I did not find. Yes, they found disguises next to these documents. You know, not in the next room or in the next container. They were all together. It was these pre-addressed to news media manifestos, pre-addressed, pre-stamped, along with money, disguises, and this fake Social Security card or real Social Security card. I don't know.
Wow, it seems. Any idea regarding all of this on how you said this happened before Christmas 2008? 2008?
Correct. Yes.
Any idea when he was planning to pull all of this off?
So I don't know offhand, but the police believe it was just a few days before the next union meeting that they show me a picture of a calendar that I can confirm was in our kitchen with an X on it, and they say that's the day. That's the day he was planning. So supposedly it was very close.
So it's a good thing that I guess that your brother got caught for whatever he was doing, and he rolled over on your father, I guess.
Absolutely.
That was timely. Do you believe, I'm not talking to them, I'm just talking to you, I've not talked to any of your brothers, do you believe that any of your brothers knew about any of this?
I don't know.
I mean,
I have no idea.
The reason, what was the part of it that your brother rolled over on your father for? I mean, obviously a lot of things, once they got to the door and saw that stuff, of course, it got very complex, but what was the part that your brother rolled over on Michael for?
Actually, no, you're right. I believe it was illegal weapons or bombs. There was something illegal in the house.
Okay.
But I'm not sure if it was the weapons or the bombs.
Okay. All right, so it may possibly at least one of your brothers did know about this for some reason. Whether they helped him with it or he told them about it, we just don't know.
Right.
Okay. So was this around the time when you found out about the pipe bombs and all these things? Is this around the time you said then in 2009 is when you do 2020 and he's on 2020? You're still on his side even after those revelations of late 2008.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't believe them at first, and yeah, the special came out in August of 2009 and was taped just a few months after he was arrested. And yeah, I was advocating for him all the time. I created him a website. I was 1,000% on his side, trying to help him. I would have never thought in a million years that he could have done any of this.
Mm-hmm. And what was the final straw for you to change?
I mean, it wasn't, I think, one thing. It took time after the ABC 2020 and fighting with people online and, just all these people finally coming around and saying it to my face and, oh, maybe it could have been him. The family started kind of turning, and then I was the last one to kind of, to believe it. I just couldn't for such a long time.
Yeah. Now he did.
It wasn't all at once.
Please, it wasn't all at once. It was just a little bit here, a little bit there.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, he did end up pleading not guilty, but he defended himself?
Yes, at some point he fired his public defender.
All right. But he failed, and he did end up going to jail for the pipe bombs and all of that.
Yes.
Okay.
Only for the guns and the bombs.
Okay. So there was an actual trial, there was a jury and everything else?
There was a trial. My goodness, I was at every single hearing, and I cannot remember if there was a jury. I don't believe so.
Okay. But you got to sit in while they presented evidence, and the prosecutors were making their case, and then your father would get up and defend himself. You were there? Were you there for the trial?
Yes, I was at every single hearing.
Okay. Did Alyssa's name and her disappearance come up in any of it?
No.
Nothing. Prosecutor never brought it up? Nothing.
Not that I believe was admitted or,
Okay.
no, I don't think that they were allowed to. I think it was strictly just the bombs and the gun.
Okay. They didn't, sometimes they might let it in if it's like a character type of thing, but I guess not. So we have these pipe bombs. He went to jail, did not successfully defend himself. Sounds to me like the evidence was pretty overwhelming. You've read some of the manifesto, and it claims that these two guys might have done something to Alyssa. So now he has like another story. He has, I guess that would go along with what he was telling your family, that somebody took her. I guess that would fall into that, I guess. Is that how you read it?
Yes and no. It wasn't the same gentleman that he accused in the beginning. The same organization, but not the same guy.
Okay.
Because at first he believed it was a young guy who worked at her school that was working electrical work there. Whether he was a part of the union or not, I couldn't tell you. But he believed it was him for a long time. And then all of a sudden, it was these two gentlemen that he supposedly killed. The police later found out he didn't. But so same agency, different people.
Okay. During all this time, being that you knew about this electrical union beef he had going back to 2001 and going right up through when the pipe bombs and everything were found, did he ever talk about anybody who was actually on his side in the union, or was it just like him versus the world?
Oh, it was always him versus the world. No one was on his side.
No one ever came over to your house who was a fellow electrical worker that you knew of, a friend, they sat down at the table and they thought about, man, this guy's really screwing you over, Michael. Nothing like that.
No, never. He had very few close friends. I mean, one or two throughout my life that I can remember.
Okay. Now, you did say, this popped up, and we have to revisit this, and your father used to be a police officer. When?
Correct. I believe it was in the 70s.
And what happened? And where was he a police officer, and how long, and why did he suddenly go from being a police officer to being in an electrical union?
Sure. So he was a Maricopa County deputy sheriff here in Arizona for it. I'm not sure how long, not very. I can't tell you for sure exactly why he's no longer a police officer, but the family rumor that is pretty confirmed, if you will, one of the more believable ones, I think, was that he helped cover up an attempted murder by his brother on his wife at the time. So at some point in the...
Those are I have to tell you, for the record, Sarah, those are very serious allegations.
Yes, no, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, and this is before I was born, and confirmed by several cousins, and something my father talks about all the time. My father spoke about it freely, that he remembers the night that his brother tried to shoot his wife. I just didn't have all the details until I got older. So this is something that there are many witnesses. There is a police report. This woman was actually shot. It was deemed an accident on this report, but the cousins remember it differently. The idea was that my father was having an affair with his brother's wife. His brother caught him in the act. At the time, my father was a police officer. His brother grabbed a gun, shot his wife, and my father helped cover it up, told her that she's going to report it as an accident. And then the story goes that they laid out all of the weapons in the back of the truck, put a blanket over it, and the kids sat on top of it while the police came. And again, these cousins tell me that this actually happened, that they remember this. And my brother and my father talked about it for years.
And I guess maybe had a good chuckle about it.
Right, and he kind of phrased it in the fact, pointing to that his brother was a bad guy. I never knew, of course, about the affair or thought that he could have been involved in some malicious way.
Michael your father was having an affair with his brother's wife.
Correct. Which, from stories, yeah, my father was quite the womanizer. That's quite known in the family. Again, very charming, very manipulative.
Okay. So, if they got away with that, then why did he lose his job as a police officer?
I think it was just because of how the report was gone. I don't think that he was fired. I think that he resigned is what happened.
Okay.
But I think everybody, this is the 70s. Things were a little bit different. I think everybody kind of knew the writing on the wall, but the official report was different.
Phoenix, this is in Maricopa County, Phoenix. Things were a little bit more wild, wild west there than they are now.
Absolutely.
Phoenix was just a little tiny town at the time. Of course, it's exploded, just like kind of like Las Vegas has over like the last 20 years. A lot of people moving there. So it's a little bit more of a metropolitan city. Maybe back then you might be able to hush something like that up. But that is a story. Once again, it's a serious allegation, but that is a story that is accepted as true within your family, within the Turney family.
Yes, and there are police documents about this woman being shot by her husband. So that absolutely happened. That's verifiable.
Okay. All right. So he was then he resigned, and then that's when he became seemingly, maybe did some other things, but he got in the electrical union and was an electrical worker for 20 years, and it seemingly had his problems there. So, okay. There's something else. If the allegation that, of course, we've talked about him quite a bit, but there's something else that I understand is something newer, just like that video that you posted on YouTube. And this seems to be a case, I should say, Sarah, this seems to be a case that is still ongoing. You're still finding material just on your own regarding, and other people are helping you with this.
Absolutely. I feel like I find something new every week, or someone comes to me and tells me something every week. It's just continuously unfolds.
Even though it's 17 years old. That's it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And, I think people are seeing media coverage and perhaps hopefully feeling compelled to speak out more.
Okay. Yes. All right, here's something else that's, I understand, is somewhat new. We remind the listeners that your mother died of cancer when you were 4 years old. But there's something that's popped up recently. I'm just going to let you talk about it. I don't want to lead you anywhere. You just talk about it. What do you want to say about that?
Sure, yeah. So my mother died when I was 4 of lung cancer. Recently, one of her sisters came to me, and said, there is a story I'd like to tell you. That when my mother was dying, she and my grandmother, so my mother's mother, were watching after her as she was dying. And at some point, my mother became afraid and started expressing concern that my father was giving her too much morphine because she was, came home to die. She wanted to die there. So he was in control of that. And, she would constantly say, no more morphine, I'm fine. And what I found out that is legitimate, we have paperwork on that the life insurance policy for my mother's death expired the day after she died. So in the Smiths, she was apparently being over-medicated is what my mother's sister says. And then died one day before this insurance policy was about to expire. And this has been confirmed by paperwork. It's been confirmed by friends of hers. It's been confirmed by family. That if she had not died that day, my father would not have gotten any life insurance money. So, in the midst of all these consequences, or all these coincidences, it really makes me think. I mean, this is very new to me. I honestly don't think I've wrapped my head around it. It takes me kind of a long time for things to sink in for me. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what to think. It's just too convenient to me, given everything else that is so convenient in this story.
That's once again another serious allegation. I mean, there, and I'm not going to say that that's, I cannot, was it? I guess what I want to say here is that there are mercy killings that go on out there. There are, wives that see their husbands deteriorating and sometimes do something, and then we have several stories of, wives being in the hospital, suffering, not going to recover, and a husband will come in and put them out of their misery. It's not because they're being mean or they're murder or anything, it's just they feel so bad. This sounds to me like something different.
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely could be. Another factor was there was never an autopsy done, which is just so out of character, I believe, for my father, for someone who wanted to know how everything worked and how everything, ticked. like you wouldn't really get an autopsy on your wife. I mean, there was a debate also about was it cervix cancer and breast cancer? What type of cancer was it? And he was always so concerned about cancer running in the family. I just don't see him not getting the autopsy and not trying to find out exactly what killed her to kind of prevent it. So it seems extremely out of character to not get an autopsy.
Okay. Maybe it's a coincidence. Maybe it's not. I don't, without an autopsy, that's a pretty salacious story. But if we're to believe that, it certainly does seem to me in Michael Turney's life that there seems to be where we could have information that would be helpful. There's no information, no videotape, no recording of a phone call that Alyssa allegedly made. Just, of course, claiming things were done to him at the electrical union that never came to fruition. Of course, he did go to jail for the pipe bombs and everything else. Just seems like there's a lot of convenient stories for certain things.
Absolutely. I mean, and in light of the fact that he had evidence for everything else that's ever happened in his life, it seems like all these major things that happened, he seems to have no evidence.
Okay. Let's talk about some other guy for at least a few moments. There was some guy who came forward, Thomas Heimer, at some point wanting to take credit for Alyssa's disappearance. What can you tell the listeners about that?
Yeah, so I believe it was 2007 or 2008. This gentleman, Thomas Heimer, came forward. He wrote to a detective and said, "I'm going to make you famous. I am a famous serial killer who has killed, many women, including J.C. Dugard, who, of course, we know is alive and well today. But in that list was Alyssa. He gave a story that was inconsistent with who she was. He said that she was a heroin addict and apparently that she had some type of sexual traits that her boyfriend couldn't confirm, and told a horrific story about murdering her and disposing of the body. The police investigated it thoroughly, went to go speak to him in person. And by the end of the conversation, he said, maybe that's not Alyssa. Maybe it was a different girl I picked up in Phoenix.
Okay, Thomas Heimer is a serial killer from the area?
He was convicted of at least one murder.
Okay.
And I'm not sure. I don't believe he was native to Arizona. I believe he was in Florida.
Okay. So the story that he was telling doesn't quite match up with what who Alyssa was, or maybe the facts of that day, anything like that. He doesn't say that he went into your house and took her, or she was walking down the street. I mean, did he get that specific in his story that he told about Alyssa?
I believe he said that he picked her up. She was in a van at a bar, and he stole the van, and that they did heroin together, which Alyssa was never known to do heroin.
Okay. And even the guy himself said, well, maybe it wasn't her. At the end of all this, he says maybe it wasn't her.
Yeah, I mean, the police tell me that they got very serious with him and said, listen, we know this girl. You have to convince me that you know her too. And at the end said, I guess that probably wasn't her. And that they deemed his confession not valid.
Mm-hmm. To your knowledge, over the last 17 years, have the police or any other names have the police ever given to you, or any other names possibly popped up who might have done, outside of maybe the possibility that Alyssa did go off on her own, any names ever come up in relation to Alyssa's disappearance?
No, there has only ever been one person of interest in this case, and that's my father.
Michael Turney. Okay.
Cool.
So he went to jail for those pipe bombs. He's out of jail, isn't he?
He is out of jail, yes.
And how long has he been out?
He's been out for over a year now.
I have to tell you, Sarah, that doesn't seem to be in jail very long for having pipe bombs and threatening to blow up a building and everything. How was it only 7 years or something?
Right. I believe he was convicted to 10, but of course, the way the prison system goes, good behavior plus time served. I'm not sure exactly the math on that, but yeah, he served less than 10 years and is now free, and I think it's terrifying. I mean, considering his plans and his potential to be dangerous and his knowledge, it's astounding to me. I do not understand how he's a free man.
That's very confusing.
We're going to talk about you and him in a moment, but do your older brothers, once again, I guess at least one of them were in their 30s when Alyssa disappeared, and others were in their 20s. Do they see him? Do they go talk to him now that he's out of jail? How do all of they get along?
Sure. So some of us don't see him, and some of them do. Some of my brothers do visit him and speak to him and continue to have a relationship with him. And I think they all understand it, and I understand to a point, but it hurts, you know. He's been told that if he does media that he won't see his grandkids, which is the exact opposite of my mission for Alyssa.
Mm-hmm.
And it breaks my heart. I try to not let it affect us. I think it does. I still love them very much. I think they still love me very much. But they want their dad, and that's their, mission, and I just don't have the same mission. I put Alyssa before a lot of things, and maybe that's foolish, and maybe that's not what a lot of people would do, but she was a kid, and I put her first over my dad and over all my brothers. They don't feel the same way.
Is one of those of your brothers that goes to see him the one that rolled over on him, that put him in jail?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
That's interesting. Huh. Okay. And Michael certainly isn't afraid of doing media. In fact, he did an interview with this other podcast that you've talked out that is devoted to nothing but Alyssa's case. He's more than willing to talk about all sorts of stuff, seemingly.
In a sense, yes. That was the first media interview he'd done in almost a decade, since 2020, and it was an official interview. That's what it ended up being. But if at the beginning of the conversation he says, "No, I don't want to do an interview with you," but he's so compelled and he's so egotistical in my mind, this is what I think,
right,
that he cannot help himself but talking about it. He loves to speak about himself. He's always been that way. He's always told his very tragic story of his life, and how he's the whistleblower and how he's the good guy. He's just trying to stand up to the government, and he's just trying to stand up to the union. And his wife died, and he's had these really unfortunate circumstances, and so he's always happy to tell that tale. But if you call it an official media interview, I think he would say no. But I think if you ran into him on the street, he would be compelled to continue to speak about it.
Yeah, in listening to that interview that he did, and even going back to when, I forget that reporter's name, that he did, the short clip that I saw for like 3 minutes, this is the one where he challenges the guy, were you ever in the military? Were you ever a cop? And the reporter saying, no, that interview that I found on YouTube. You just can't nail this guy down. It's like trying to nail Jello to a wall. It seemingly has an answer for everything. Is how I would explain Michael Turney.
Absolutely, and he's always been that way. He's extremely intelligent and is knowledgeable on many topics, but not all the time, and he catches himself in a lot of lies. To me, it's very obvious because I've seen it my whole life. I think to others it might be disguised as something else, but no, he's all over the place and can't stay on topic and isn't truthful, and I think it shows. Okay.
Speaking of interviews and talks, you actually got to speak to him once he got out of jail in October 2017, so almost a year ago.
Correct.
How was that arranged? And let's talk about that conversation you had with him. How did that happen?
Yeah, so I called him. I got his number from one of my brothers. It was the first time I spoke to him outside of a prison line that was recorded, or outside of, in the prison walls. So I thought he might be a little more free to speak, and he definitely was. So I called him up and said, I want to meet up with you, and you're getting older, and I want to speak to you before you die, essentially. I want to clear the air, and I want to say everything that I've ever thought about what happened to Alyssa. And we arranged it. We met at a Starbucks. I recorded it. It was over an hour long. He was aggressive and tried to manipulate me. And
Just so we're clear, he knew that he was being recorded? Just to be clear.
No, he didn't know he was being recorded.
Okay.
But Arizona's a one-party consent state, and he taught me that, so
Okay.
I'm proud.
Okay. All right.
And it's hard because I see so much of myself in him sometimes that it kind of drives me nuts, but it's not all bad. I mean, again, endlessly confusing. But no, he didn't know he was being recorded. I just did it on my phone, and, it was, for me, it was private. I wanted to be able to re-listen to it and understand what I was hearing because he does get off topic so much. But then there were things that he said that I wanted to share with people. He said some really outrageous things.
Okay. What were some of those outrageous things?
Sure. I mean, the two things, of course, that stick out in my mind above everything else are his two confessions, as I call them. I mean, to me, they're confessions. He will tell me everything about what happened to Alyssa on his deathbed. He also tells me he will tell me everything about what happened to Alyssa if they give him lethal injection within 10 days.
Uh-huh. Within 10 days of that conversation you have with him?
Correct.
Yeah, he sounds like a weirdo. So you have this recording. How long of a discussion was it?
Over an hour, between an hour and a half.
Mm. And you had told me that he actually trashes Alyssa in this conversation?
Oh, absolutely. Again, he speaks about her as if she's some type of ex-girlfriend, talks about how dumb she was and how promiscuous she was and how she just wanted to go shack up with every boy and get tattoos everywhere and just, again, just puts her down left and right. Even to the point where he goes, you remember how Alyssa was. She was, this way. She didn't remember this, and she was easily manipulated, and just talks about her in a very terrible light, not like you see a lot of parents of missing children. Most of them talk about them in very good lights. They remember the good.
Of course they do.
That's how I remember Alyssa.
And he trashes the boyfriend she had at the time as well. Can't let it go 17 years later.
Right, yeah, no, that was another factor, right? He talks about his truck, he says, and his piece of shit truck that barely ran. Again, as if he's, the new boyfriend to his ex-girlfriend. That's something I can so see a guy talking down to another guy about, like, and his truck's just a piece of shit, he ended up with this guy. It's just, it's on a different level. It's not appropriate for a father-daughter relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what adult looks at a teenage truck and talks trash about it? Like, that kid has a vehicle. Kids aren't supposed to have wonderful vehicles that are super reliable, right? I mean, you don't.
Right.
It's just not a normal thought that I think a parent would have.
Right. Of course. You said that he would offer a confession as to what happened on his deathbed, and then he made the comment about the injection. During this conversation, though, did he attempt to point the finger at anybody else in Alyssa's disappearance?
At that point, I tried to nail it down from him, and he just circled the point. I said, well, do you think it was the union? Do you think it was this other guy? What do you think? And he never really clearly answered me, as he usually doesn't.
Yeah. Like I said, it's like trying to nail Jello to a wall with him.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just right. So, and during that conversation, did he ever buy into the idea that Alyssa actually did just run away?
Yeah, I mean, a few times he says that. Other times he says that she was taken. Again, he's all over the place. He says, well, I gave you everything you wanted so that you wouldn't run away too. He'd always say things like that. But again, it was all over the place. He blames everybody all the time.
Do you have any plans to release that? Being that it was seemingly legally done, I don't know what the recording laws are in Arizona, but you just said what they were. Do you have any plans to release that, talk to the public?
Yeah, eventually I would. I think I might release some type of video where I can go through it point by point because it is so confusing. Yeah, I would love to. I don't have any concrete plans as of right now. I'd like to figure out what the best way to communicate it is because I want to release it in its entirety, to show this is exactly what happened. I'm not chopping it. I'm not cutting it. I'm not taking it out of context. Right.
That's very important. These other brothers that you have, do you think they think that Michael did something to Alyssa?
Yes, they all do. They all believe that he sexually abused her and murdered her.
And they still hang out with him.
Some do, yes.
Some do, right? Not all of them. That's not. We'll not put them all in the same category, but some of them do.
Yes, 2 of the 4 do.
Okay. And we're not going to mention their names. We've not mentioned their names the entire time. The last 17 years, to make one of the biggest understatements in the history of Unfound, had to have been a roller coaster for you, especially considering for the first 8 years after Alyssa disappeared, you were on your father's side, and now the last almost 10 years, you've been the opposite. Can you explain that? And once again, you becoming a grown woman in that time. What's this been like the last 17 years?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been a roller coaster, exactly like you said. And we're talking about the ages of 19 to I'm now 29. So a very crazy, impressionable time. But yeah, I mean, I'd never been away from my dad for more than maybe a few days at that point in my life, and all of a sudden he was ripped from me. And so I kind of just, took his instruction, and, I started filing lawsuits for him, and, approaching handwriting experts for him and doing everything he said, really until, even after the 2020 came out for a little bit. But I had said to him during all this, well, why doesn't everything add up? Why are people saying this? And he kind of danced around the question. And soon it became really apparent that he didn't care about me. I was doing things like trying to keep his mortgage together for him, and he stopped caring. He didn't care whether I had a roof over my head or not. My brothers weren't involved in my life a whole lot. I was on my own, and he didn't care. And then these facts started coming out about him, things that people were saying, that he wasn't as innocent as I thought he was. And that coupled with him just continuing to be an awful parent, it all just really came to fruition. And I slowly but surely kind of realized what all my brothers realized this whole entire time. And then I got serious about it. I wanted people to know that this wasn't the case anymore. I contacted 2020 and I said, I want you to know that's not my opinion anymore. And they put a little clause onto the end of the episode now where it says, Sarah doesn't believe her father's entirely innocent. And then it was when the police, when he was released from prison for the bombs, I thought for sure. I had so much hope. And again, I'm still naive in so many ways. But I held out so much hope that he would be charged with her murder with something. And he wasn't. And the media wasn't there. They pounded at my door all hours of the night when he was first arrested. When he was released and not charged with her murder or disappearance or anything, that shattered my world. And then the police sat me down and said, listen, we're not going to prosecute this case. We're not going to search for a body. The only thing you can do is get media. And so that's what I did. I felt extremely upset and discouraged, and like no one was on my side. No one wanted to help me. My family doesn't want to be involved in media. The police don't want to be involved in media, but they're telling me that's my only chance. So I got really determined. The podcast came out of left field. They approached me. I was really unsure, but then it came out, and then I had this amazing partner and this amazing friend who really, really cared about this case and looked up documents that I'd never seen before and was able to tell me the facts based on these documents and her research, and that changed everything. And then I got very, very serious. Another turning point for me, too, was I approached one of the detectives that were on her case for 9 years or so, and he spoke to me for hours, very candidly about this case. And I saw his passion and how much he believed what I believed. And I just got so much energy around it and realized that that's what I have to do. I have to get the media. Nobody's going to listen to me. Nobody's going to listen to these detectives. No one's going to listen to this independent journalist. It has to be all of us. It has to be everyone coming together. Like, this has to be a Casey Anthony or a Natalie Holloway or an O.J. Simpson. That's the only way I'm going to get this exposure, and the only way I'm going to get a fair trial for my sister.
Right.
So, yeah, I went from believing she was alive and sipping margaritas on the beach, which is a real paper I wrote in college, to knowing that she's not with us anymore. And in my heart, believing that I know who did this to her and just wanting justice. And again, all I want is a fair trial, and I don't think it's a lot to ask.
Right.
Since you've changed your mind on this once again over the last 10 years, like you said, you've had a chance to do a lot of work on this, and of course, a lot of nights where you're staring at the ceiling, probably thinking about, what happened and everything. Please do not say it on this, but do you have an idea of where Alyssa could be, given now everything that you know about what you think you know and what the public thinks they know about Alyssa's disappearance? Do you have an idea?
I do. I have two areas that I believe she might be.
Okay. And being that he's out of jail now, we're not going to say where those areas might be, because if he was to hear this, he might, if he might be right, we don't want to foreshadow anything. So we'll just leave it at that. So you've had a chance to think about that, and knowing your father and everything, you've had a chance to think about that. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Please mention at this point, this podcast that is being done that is exclusively for Alyssa's disappearance. What is the name of that podcast?
Sure, it's called Missing Alyssa.
And how long has it been out? How many episodes have been out so far? Is it a continuing thing? Is it done? What status is it right now?
Yeah, it's been out just over a year now, and I believe it has 15 total episodes, and it is continuous. She updates it as things come out, which we're finding is more and more often.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, it is continuously updated.
All right. So, and it's on iTunes and Stitcher, those places that people usually find podcasts, like Unfound. Where Unfound is, this other podcast is there as well, to your knowledge?
Yes, it should be in most podcast players or at missingalyssa.com.
Okay, great. And on there, one of the hosts, as we mentioned before, did have that interview talk with Michael that we've already mentioned. That would be one of the episodes, right?
Yes, you can hear almost an entire hour of him rambling on. You can hear
yes,
it for
you
yourself.
can.
It's quite something.
And I've listened to it, and you are correct. Do you have a Facebook page? Is there like a website? What other places are there for Alyssa?
Sure. Yeah, there's a Facebook page. I have an Instagram page. I have.
Well, please give them the names. The Facebook page is called.
Help Find Alyssa.
Okay.
Is the Facebook page.
Okay.
On Instagram, it is Justice for Alyssa, and then I'm very active on Twitter. For hashtag Justice for Alyssa is huge, and you can see me on Twitter at Sarah Turney. But those are definitely the best places. There is a petition through the petition site that I link on all of those sites frequently. But the best thing that people can do really is to contact Bill Montgomery, write him a letter. I want him to hear every single day about this case, because the petition is wonderful, and we have about 40,000 signatures, but no one's going to listen until it gets to 500,000, and that's the unfortunate truth. I've seen a lot of petitions go down there with very high numbers, 40,000, for example, and they don't care. It's just not enough. It seems like a lot in your heart, but unfortunately to them, that's not a lot of.
And Bill Montgomery, who is he?
Bill Montgomery is the district attorney for Maricopa County, so he is the gentleman that decides whether or not this will be prosecuted in court. Okay,
very good. And we should once again state for the record regarding Michael Turney. He has never admitted to anything regarding any of this. He never, in the last 17 years, didn't want to take any responsibility for the pipe bombs. In fact, in the interview that I saw, he called them firecrackers.
Correct.
All right. He has rejected any allegations that he abused Alyssa in any way.
Correct.
All right. He claims that never happened. And of course, he rejects the idea that it had anything to do with Alyssa's disappearance.
Correct.
Okay. Any final words, Sarah, before we complete this interview?
Just that I need help, and I've had some really wonderful resources and people covering this case, but I need people to continue to share and to care and to contact Bill Montgomery. Again, all I want is a fair trial. I think she deserves at least that, and for people that have already shared, thank you, and you are helping, and just please continue to do so. I need your support. The internet community lifts me up more than you'll ever know.
Sarah, thank you for joining us on this episode of Unfound.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And that was my interview with Sarah Turney, half-sister of Alyssa Turney. I thank her for joining me and all of you on this episode. I also want to reiterate that there is a podcast devoted exclusively to Alyssa's disappearance. The podcast is called Finding Alyssa. And as Sarah said, she believes you can find it in all the places where Unfound also plays. You've now heard Sarah's own manifesto, her views, her motives, her intentions in relation to what happened to her sister Alyssa, and also who she believes is responsible. Speaking of that, it's hard not to point the finger at Michael. You don't have to be a missing persons expert to see that, I don't think. The videotaping system didn't record the day Alyssa disappeared. How convenient. The day she allegedly called, Michael's recording system didn't tape it. Once again, how convenient. His on-the-fringe theory that some disgruntled electricians took Alyssa. The manifesto, as it were. Not to mention that Michael seemingly told different stories to different people regarding Alyssa and what happened to her. Obviously, all of that is concerning. Yet, I have to admit, I can see the other side of it. Alyssa's note about going to California is a problem. A big one. It has all the signs of a runaway note, meaning she writes it, leaves it on the kitchen table as she is going out the door, never to be seen again. Now, Sarah may be correct that the final part of it was written at another time and under duress due to the sentences not being straight across and the capital A being different in her name. And yes, maybe, possibly, Michael was looming over her, forcing Alyssa to write the final part. But that would mean Michael knew the note existed. Yet surely Alyssa wouldn't tell him about it because she'd know the crap she'd get. Moreover, why tell anyone about a note that you don't want anyone to see until you're gone? That is hard to understand. Was Michael going through Alyssa's stuff after she went to school that day and found it? And that's the reason he took her out of class early. Now there's a thought. The other issue, though, is the note says nothing about the alleged abuse she suffered at the hands of Michael. Yet Alyssa seemed to be more than happy to write about it in letters to friends. But in the very letter that would be her goodbye to her allegedly abusive stepfather, she says nothing about the most likely reason she would be leaving. Instead, the note is directed at Sarah, not Michael. Yep, that's a stumper. But here's a new thought. Could there have been a note for Sarah and one for Michael? With that, I'll leave the rest of the theorizing up to you. And that's the program. If you found it informative, please go to the app that you use to listen to Unfound and give this podcast a nice review. I thank you for listening. I'm Ed Densel, and you've been listening to Unfound.